course, a very well-known piece, and up until relatively recently was famous as a Bach Minuet in G. It's, of course, from a notebook that his wife, his second wife, Magdalena, kept and had a lot. Most of it was in her handwriting, and it was a lot of pieces that her husband had written, some of her kids, and turns out a lot of other people. And the piece has now been, since about the 1970s, attributed to Christian Petzold, who was another organist from Dresden in Germany. So we're going to take a look at this. It's a really popular guitar piece, though, because it's very simple on a lot of fronts, but it's also a great way to practice, first of all, reading a song. It's in the key of G, Minuet in G, no surprise there. And most of it is played in first position or a slightly extended first position, reaching up to notes up to the 5th fret. But the little middle part is better to play up high. And there are a lot of different ways of fingering it. So as I go through the walkthrough segments, or segment, don't know how many there are going to be just yet. May break it down into 2. I probably will. There'll probably be 2. As we go through the walkthrough segments, we'll talk about possible different fingerings and the reason for using some fingerings that maybe seem a little more difficult than would be necessary. One of the big things to keep in mind, and I really encourage you to try playing it first now that you've heard it, is that we're hearing 2 distinct voices. We've got a melody. Now that is not part of the melody. That's the end of the melody, the end of the 8th measure. We also have a bass line. So we want to make sure that those 2 parts come out very independent and distinct and don't crash into each other. So that's what we're trying to do with this. Is a very simple 2-part piece, a bass line and a melody line. Let's coming up, I will just kind of walk through it and scope it out. We'll see what we have. Maybe well, I'll tell you more about that in the next segment. Let's take a look at the first section. The song is in a very common form used back in those days, called a binary form. 2 sections, in this case they're equal length, they're both 16 measures, and you would typically play the first one twice and then the second one twice. I don't believe, yes I did. In the playthrough I did do the repeats just because it's good practice to get two for your twofer. So one of the first things you should do with any piece is do the pre-flight check. Take a quick look at it. Notice what key it's in. Okay, we see it's got 1 sharp, key of G. Play a G scale. Start getting your fingers used to notes that they're going to be playing. With the right hand, we're going to use your thumb for all of the bass notes, and then alternating fingers generally for consecutive 8th notes. But if we have notes, quarter notes that might be on different strings, we can use the same finger for the same, like when we have the 2 G's in the second measure. That could be done with the same finger. Could also alternate fingers. It doesn't really matter too much. We notice some left-hand fingering in there. All of the numbers next to the notes are telling you which left-hand finger goes to that note. And as we look a little further into the second section, we'll see some numbers with circles around them. Those are representing string numbers. And so we're going to have some notes played not in their simplest position. If we take a look at measure 17, we see a G that we normally would play on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, but it says 2nd string. So we need to understand how notes get shifted to other strings. A brief talking about that is, or summary I guess of that, is that the strings are tuned 5 frets apart. So the 5th fret of the 2nd string is the E that is the same as the E open on the 1st string. So the G that would be on the 3rd fret of the E string would be on the 8th fret of the 2nd string. We're going to see some other notes. It's even going to go to an A in that little part. So that A would be at the 10th fret. We'll talk about that as we break down into the second segment. But the first line of the B part does include some notes up in 7th position, or up around that neighborhood. Okay, so now looking a little further ahead, I see a lot of bass notes. I see some there was something else here kind of important that happens at the end. Yeah, like we see in the very last measure of section A, we see a G with a 4 on it and a stem up and a stem down. That means it's both a melody note and a bass note, and in this particular case we're going to play 2 Gs. The open one as the melody note and the same note fretted on the 5th fret of the D string as the bass note.